Hello, everyone, and welcome back. This is Terias, and we are once again reading a chapter of my own story. Chronicles of the Librarian, Chapter 2, Unexpected Prisoners. There were many things Terias struggled to own up to before he lost his planet. His friends is one of many. Watching their study sessions from time to time to make sure things were going smoothly. As Terias stopped through the doorway he just rent open, over the sea of people gathered in the open space that was once a factory floor, his eyes locked onto two people. Two people trapped behind a force field. They were not his friends, not the people he had feared to be there. To any human, they would look like young adults, barely 20, but their metallic skin told Terias all he needed to know. In the split second it took for him to see them trapped up there on the stage, Terias' mind went to another place and another time. Arthuria. Terias stalked through the hallways of the library quietly, sorting through books loaded up on a translucent gray platform behind him, replacing them onto their proper shelves, occasionally being interrupted by quiet giggling or chuckling. He sighed to himself, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Signs of sleep deprivation plagued his body, rendering the normally brilliant metallic an almost dull, dark gray color. They are happy. You wanted them to be happy, he reminded himself in a whisper as he continued to place books on shelves. His normally flowing robes hung loosely on his body, allowing for the armor he wore underneath to shine through in some places, the only spot of color and life left in his overworked visage. He heard the giggling, chuckling, and whispered shushing get closer to him as he worked. Whether he was moving towards them or they were moving towards him, he found himself dreading finding out either way. Terry! We found you! Terias shifted his eyes to a bubbly, silver-skinned young woman. Her hair was an icy blue, and her excitedly moving robes were ocean blue and silver. While Horace barely wore his robes in favor of armor, Terias knew his friend Fantasia barely wore armor under her robes, believing her magic to more than make up for it. Horace was standing next to her, red hair once again standing up and lit, though this time in excitement instead of embarrassment. So you have. From the excited grins on your faces, I take it you have something to tell me? Terias said, trying his best to look happy for them both. He was happy, but between their happiness and the large amount of work given to him by Asmodeus, he barely had the energy to fake a smile. Sympathy flashed on the two's faces for a bit before the excitement returned. They hugged him. We wanted you to be the first to know. We got the test results back this morning, Horace said, grin nearly splitting his gilded face, it was so wide. Bright eyes were nearly as bright as his hair at this point. While Terias' tired expression turned to one of confusion, he looked over to Fantasia, who was practically floating. We're having a baby! Two babies! Terry, we're having twins! Terias' eyes widened in shock, words catching in his throat. He looked between the two of them to see if they were messing with him, repeating this action a few times. When he was satisfied this was not a prank, the shock and the sleep deprivation caused Terias to faint. Earth, a few minutes before Terias walked into the factory floor. As the sounds of fighting echoed dully outside, practically no one heard it inside. Several gangs and costumed villains stood on the open concrete floor of the old mask factory, while standing above them, all on a rickety stage, was a man in a dark, crimson three-piece suit. The inside shirt dark green, his tie black. He had a whole hood pulled up and sewn onto a theater mask. This theater mask would be familiar to many, its features wrinkled in an over-the-top frown, gilded teardrops going down the crimson cheeks. To his right, standing next to a lever, was another man in an identical suit, though his suit was brighter, newer. His mask was upturned in a ludicrously large smile. Even now, soft giggling could always be heard behind the mask. Despite this, his body language was calm, a gloved hand resting on top of the large lever, ready to pull it but awaiting his cue. To the man in the tragedy mask's left was a third and final man in a crimson three-piece. His suit was the most worn. The left elbow had a purple patch, the right knee a black patch. The shoes didn't match, as if put on in haste. He stood farthest back, his hands behind his back. His own theater mask was half tragedy, half comedy. When the need arose that this crimson mask needed to be referred to as something other than that, he went by playwright. Tragedy leaned into the microphone at the center of the stage, grabbing the mic stand with one gloved hand and clearing his throat loudly into it. The roar of the crowd died down as they all listened to the men that had called them all here. Ladies, gentlemen, and every other crook and creep that found an invite on their doorstep, you don't need me to tell you, the three of us don't show up together very often. We hate each other almost as much as we hate all of you. For some reason, this made comedy erupt into loud, mocking laughter, silenced almost as quickly by playwright turning his head to an almost unnatural angle to glare at him. But tonight, folks, we found something that even got grumpy old playwright to leave his hole in the ground and play ball. You've all heard of the string of robberies all around the city. No alarms triggered, banks looted practically dry. You all probably wondered, who's doing my job better than me? Well, wonder no more. It was us, the Crimson Masks, testing out some new toys, and tonight, for one night only, we're going to be auctioning those toys to you. This caused the uproar of the crowd to resume, some in indignation at the comments, some demanding to know what toys they were offering, and the truly smart among them asking why the Crimson Masks would want to sell such useful equipment to their own competition. Quiet! The raspy, strained voice of tragedy yelled over the crowd, beady brown eyes glaring through the mask. A wave of a tired, almost exhausted feeling washed over the crowd. Comedy's laughter once more got louder, and then the opposite feeling washed over them, lifting their spirits and making them feel weirdly happy. Playwright sighs in exasperation at them both, and tragedy clears his throat again. Now some of you think yourselves rather smart. Others among you prefer someone else doing the thinking. Tonight, we have a little something for everyone. Tragedy waves his hand to Comedy, who laughs louder than he has all night as he pulls the theatrically large lever he was standing next to. The curtain behind the three of them falls to the floor, red satin pooling on the stage. Behind the curtain is a translucent blue box. Visible through the box are two individuals, a young boy and a young girl, wearing tattered robes that barely exposed high-tech armor underneath them. Just as the crowd began to question who these people were and why they were caged, the sound of a man shouting behind the door at the other end of the room from the stage echoed through the factory floor, and then the sound of metal tearing as a man tore open said doors and tossed them away. Upstairs. Lynx lands on the roof first, two goons rushing at her. She flicks her wrist, extending her whip around the leg of one and using it to toss the first into the second, both yelling out in surprise and landing in a heap, groaning. Black Owl went high, cape turning into gliding wings again as he flying kicked two thugs to the floor. landing on top of them and throwing 3 owl-shaped objects at 3 approaching goons. The devices latched onto them and let out a controlled shock, making them yell and shake before collapsing to the floor. "Another new toy, Birdie?" Lynx joked at Black Owl, using her whip to toss a goon at him following up with a shock punch to the abdomen to the flying goon, before dodging the punch of a thug that had run up behind him. Grabbing said thug's arm, he tosses them at Lynx. She catches the thug in a leg lock and slams him headfirst into the metal floor of the rooftop. Spinning on her hands, she flared her legs out, spiked shoes lashing out at a group of thugs and goons that tried to surround her, before launching off her hands and whipping another goon into position to break her fall. "It's not ready to distribute to the others yet. It's the first night of field testing," he grunts, pressing a button on both wrists. Smoke begins to release from his hands. He inhales deeply as soon as some goons that had been setting up a large gun open fire. Breathing out harshly, the black smoke bellows out into a large black cloud, causing the goons surrounding the large gun to cough and hack. Black Owl clenches both fists, and as if receiving a signal, the cloud condenses, coating the gun and the thugs, the material hard enough to prevent struggling, but also breathable enough that none would suffocate. "Whoa, I take it that's also just now being field tested?" Lynx chuckled, stomping her foot on the chest of one of the goons who tried to reach for their gun, making the goon groan in pain and go limp. Smirking at Black Owl as he slid a panel on his arm, revealing a small screen. Angling the screen down as he studies it, he growls in frustration, several red dots appearing below them. "Yes, it is. Looks like it's trial by fire. Half the Crimson Mask gang is on the floor below us, and the rest of the city's gangs are in the main factory room. So we better hurry down there." Lynx grins again, looking at the skylight windows just a few feet away from them, smirking at Black Owl as she flashes her claws, which extend from her glove. "Whoever takes out the most of the poor gangsters on the floor below us pays for dinner?" she asked. Without waiting for an answer, she jumped at the skylight, the glass shattering from the force of her legs as she goes through it. Goons and thugs shout in surprise and train their pistols and rifles at her. A black cloud spreads from the now broken skylight and then wraps around the gangsters immediately surrounding Lynx. "That's 10 for me," Black Owl says, a bit of mirth in his voice he wouldn't let anyone else hear. Lynx smirks up at him, grabbing a black orb from her own belt and throwing it at a crowd. The obsidian marble rolled to a halt in the middle of a group, then began to spin faster and faster, shooting off lasers that melted their guns or blinded them, making them all cry out before the marble released a cloud of knockout gas, dropping them all to the floor. "And that's 12 for me," she smirked, winking at him before backflipping to show off, landing amongst another group, twirling her whip to make them all back up nervously. As they backed up, they stepped on a wire and yelped in unison as Black Owl pulled the cord, all of them getting pulled into the ceiling, dangling midair. 21. Black Owl smirks back, letting a few thugs jump on his back, headbutting and kicking at them as more and more joined the dog pile. Eventually getting the dark-cloaked man to his knees, as one of them reached for his pistol to shoot Black Owl. The black and gray whip in Lynx's hand wrapped around his arm and sent a shock through it. The electricity traveled through all the thugs, making them cry out in pain, all but Black Owl, whose suit was made to withstand such attacks. The thugs and goons dropped to the floor around Black Owl. "Humph. 21. Splitting the bill it is, then," she chuckles, Black Owl giving a small nod. Hearing metal clanging underneath them, checking his gauntlet screen, a blue dot joins the red ones on the floor below them. Black Owl chuckles, smirking over to Lynx. "Looks like the old man is in position. Let's not keep him waiting," Black Owl states before rushing for a nearby door, Lynx laughing as she followed behind him. Around back, Owlette swung to the back of the warehouse. Legs extended, she kicked into a larger thug's face, sending them flying back into a couple of their buddies. 2 metallic blue bird-shaped daggers fly past her as she lands, knocking the weapons of two goons that were running to her out of their hands. Owlette capitalizing on this with a kick to the crotch of one, followed by an uppercut to the gut of the other, both of them collapsing to either side of her. You know, sometimes I wonder why Black Owl chose you as his new partner over Lynx, Owlette says over the comms. Blue Jay using his grapple hook to wall run on the side of the warehouse, does a kick jump off, tossing out two more daggers mid-backflip to disarm two more goons before promptly landing on their faces. The two crumble to the ground with heavy groans. It's not really over Lynx. She does eventually get bored of the tech talk and the detective work. They work together as long as they can, but I think it's healthy that they recognize they don't like the same things and give each other space. Blue Jay comments in an analytical fashion, elbowing a goon that ran up behind him before grabbing their arm and judo throwing them at Owlette. Owlette grabs the goon by the collar and the seat of the pants and uses them as a battering ram into a group of four that had run up to her. I guess that's fair. I'm kind of jealous at how perfect they are together. They're married and I haven't seen them fight once. Owlette takes a bird-shaped device from her belt and throws it over her shoulder. Knockout gas spreading mid-flight before forming a cloud that took out a couple of the goons. She turns her head sharply when she hears Blue Jay cry out in pain. One of the goons they had knocked down apparently finding one of Blue Jay's daggers and deciding to stab him with it. Blue Jay clenched his fists and banged them together, causing electricity to spark between his gauntlets. It travels up the insulated suit and into the dagger, the goon screaming out in pain and letting go. I think they hide their fights from us. They do disagree less often than they used to, though. Blue Jay bit back the pain as he slammed both fists into the goon that stabbed him, shocking them hard enough to burn through their tucks before they fall to the floor, the suit automatically beginning to patch over the cut. Some thugs were emboldened by the boy getting hurt, though, and lined their guns only to drop them when the night air was pierced by a loud owl cry. Blue Jay turned to see Owlette holding a small speaker device, throwing a handful of bolas to tie up the thugs that were holding their ears. You okay, Blue? I keep telling you to watch your back, she said, rushing over to the younger man and inspecting the quickly patching spot on his shoulder. Blue Jay patted her hand reassuringly before standing fully and rubbing the shoulder, moving his arm around to test the range of motion. I'll be okay. The new suits are amazing, especially the pain numbing. I should have remembered to clean up my daggers, though. Blue Jay smacks himself in the forehead and presses a button on his belt. The bird-shaped buckle glowing blue, and the daggers flying over and sticking to it. Blue Jay releases the button, collecting the daggers and placing them back on his belt. No kidding. I know Black Owl said self-repairing last briefing, but that's a lot faster than the test models, Owlette remarked, walking ahead of Blue Jay, pulling a gray device with a screen off her own belt as she approached the back door of the warehouse. The screen lit up a map with several red dots as well as a few purple dots, a dark green energy signature around the purple dots. Looks like we've got prisoners, but this outline is consistent with Crimson Mask's cages in the past. But when did he use magic cages? She showed the screen to Blue Jay, who, even behind the domino mask, looked just as confused about the sudden change in M.O. as she was. With a shrug, he pressed an electrified glove to the keypad next to the back door, the shock from the glove making the keypad light go from green to red to green. When he's behind bars, we can ask him, Blue Jay says confidently, quietly opening the door and motioning for Owlette to go in first. She feigned a flattered response as she slid in silently. Blue Jay followed close behind and carefully closed the door as Owlette ducked behind a stack of industrial crates. He quickly ducked behind some old machinery as well, the two looking out over the room. Holy maker, the two said practically in unison as they looked out at the remains of a sorting area. Catwalks and rolling conveyor belts reinforced to hold human weight as thugs and goons patrol atop them. Below them, several metallic-skinned men and women, the youngest of which looked about 19 and the oldest about 22, were all working on different devices, some on guns, some on swords, some on things Owlet and Blue Jay couldn't even begin to guess. All of this while surrounded by a box that wouldn't be visible if the two crime fighters didn't have lenses that allowed them to see different energy signatures. Okay, the bright side is not too many guards. Downside is, I don't see what's keeping the box running. Usually you need a sorcerer or something to keep a shield like that working. Even if we take them out, we may need that librarian guy to take it down, and he's busy. Blue Jay says, switching back to his analytical voice once more, the two of them hearing metal clanging in the distance as if in response to Blue Jay's remark. Owlet grits her teeth as she scans the room, seeing the boxy room suspended above the main floor, only accessible by the catwalks above them. She motions her head for Blue Jay to look at it. Betcha whoever or whatever is holding this operation together is in there. You get the guards, I spring the hostages? She suggests, grabbing her grappling hook from her belt. Blue Jay gives a nod, grabbing his own blue and yellow grappling hook. Owlet counted down on her fingers where both of them could see. 3, 2, 1. When she clenched her fist, they both fired off their grapples. Blue Jay immediately jumping a pair of guards, shocking them both unconscious with an electrified punch to their jaws. The shouts of pain get the attention of the other guards who start to run down their catwalks towards Blue Jay. Blue Jay sure likes distracting. Owlet chuckles, her own grapple hook getting her close to the door of the command room, landing silently so the distracted guards don't realize that Blue Jay isn't alone. She checks the door, silently relieved there was no lock as she slowly opens it. However, inside is a person, one she recognizes. Gagged and strapped to machines that seem to be constantly draining power from her was the hero Topaz. Topaz's typically well-tanned skin was pale. Her hair, typically the same color as her gemstone namesake, was practically gray and lifeless. She struggled against her restraints upon seeing Owlet, but that just seemed to cause the machines to drain more from her, making her scream out in pain through the gag. Topaz! Calm down, I'll get you out of there, Owlet says, rushing over to the machines and hurriedly grabbing fistfuls of the restraints, yanking hard to remove them from her fellow heroine. As Owlet worked to free her, Topaz struggled again, trying to say something to Owlet, but unable to due to the pain. Before Owlet can ask what was wrong, she felt a hammer slam into her back, machines breaking against Owlet's body, and sparks flying everywhere. Owlet looked behind her, seeing a woman in a deep purple corset and a hooded cape, a crimson theater mask under the hood. This mask had heart-shaped eyes and a goofily large smile. Hey, little Dick, you're lucky that fancy new suit protects you from electricity. Now, please break my mask. Romance spoke in an oddly friendly manner as she wound her oversized hammer back and swung it again. This time, Owlet ducked under, and all the hammer came into contact with was more machinery. Owlet stepped behind Romance and did a spinning kick, which Romance dropped to the floor like a stringless puppet to dodge. What gives, Ro? I thought you quit the villain business. Owlet shouted in confusion, quickly ducking under another hammer strike that knocked more metal and glass from the machinery it hit down. Romance's movements were unnatural, as if they weren't being made by a human, but a doll without joints. Well, apparently, of the three, Playwright took the most offense to my leaving. Unexpected, but, well, you know how weird he is. Snuck into Venus's house and fitted us both with new masks. Now all I can control are my lips. You gotta smash this mask. The battle continued as Romance spoke. Owlet struggled to get a line on the mask as she ducked and dodged inside the confined space. not even taking the time to question the part about Crimson Mask getting Venus too. Venus, come on, you can fight this! Meanwhile, Blue Jay had his own romance-masked opponent. The thugs and goons Blue Jay had been fighting lay unconscious around the two of them as Venus rode after the nimble young man in the maw of Venus flytrap. Vines embedded into the walls of the warehouse as Blue Jay managed to duck and swing away from them. Again? No, I can't. I cannot even feel my body with this new mask. You have to destroy it before it makes me destroy you. Venus's normally honeyed voice responded from behind the mask that matched her partner's, sounding honestly a bit panicked at the prospect of being completely out of control. Despite the total rampage her body seemed to be on, all her plants avoided the cage of the prisoners as if she had been ordered to. Suddenly they both heard a loud, frustrated roar as Romance was punched through the window of the observation room and into the giant Venus flytrap, causing it to buckle and Venus to grab onto its sides to keep from falling. Topaz stood in the middle of the hole she made, her entire right arm covered in crystalline scales. What the fuck? Before Blue Jay could ask any questions, a different roar rang out, one of pure rage, followed closely by a large wave of dark green energy. As the wave hit Romance and Venus, masks shattered into hundreds of pieces, raining down from their faces. Owlet emerged in time to see the wave pass Romance and Venus and crash into the cage holding the prisoners, tearing the cage of magical energy asunder like its existence was a lie. Back with Terias. Terias glared at the crowd before him. Floating up above them, his gloved hands extended like claws once more. A large Latino man in a wrestler's mask stands up, glaring at the intruder. Stomping over to him as he turned a dial on his chest, purple pipes along his body start pumping. His body grew and grew till it fills out the large wrestling suit he wore. El Diablo, as fun as you usually are to fight, I'm not in the mood, Terias says calmly, catching the oversized fist of the man and using it to spin him above Terias's head. Faking a yawn, Terias then threw the oversized wrestler across the room, crashing into the stage, causing the wood to fly everywhere. This is how things are going to work today. Black Owl and Lynx will be down here in 10 seconds, or Black Owl will call for backup because, well, literally all of you are here. The Speedsters are on backup duty this week, so you'll have at most another 15 seconds to run. I'm going to ignore anyone who isn't Crimson Mask today, so if you want to take this opportunity to leave, do so right now. Terias glared down at them sternly. Some of them took this as a challenge. Others had started to make for the exits. Satisfied with this, Terias starts floating towards the Crimson Masks. Black Owl and Lynx popped out and blocked the villains that tried to flee. Well now, this was unexpected. What did we do to upset one of Heroes United's biggest sourpusses? This time, instead of tragedy, it was comedy that had spoken amongst the Crimson Masks. He pulled out a red and gold pistol with a strange deep blue crystal towards the back, aiming and firing at Terias, who held his clawed hand out, a dark green shield absorbing the shot of blue energy. As Terias was about to open his mouth and answer comedy, a frustrated, pained roar tore through the fighting. Everything went dead silent for a second as Terias' look went from mad to royally pissed off. My daughter? You pansy-assed coward took my daughter? Terias felt some of the villains approaching to attack him. Turning his head unnaturally far, he let out a roar of rage, a roar that sounded inhuman, the force of it blasting the villains and their gangs to the walls from the force of it. Terias turned back to the Crimson Masks, his his cloak moving up his arm to reveal high-tech looking armor of electrum and purple coloration, slamming his hand down on the gauntlet. "Let's see how your two new toys like this," Terias growled. Anyone able to see magic would then see a huge wave of dark green energy start from Terias and crash through the rest of the warehouse. The tech from the villains turned off. The cage holding two people on stage was erased, and more likely happened behind the scenes. The only tech unaffected was Black Owl and Lynx's. The two that were caged stared at Terias, shaking in fear. Terias grabbed comedy with one hand and tragedy with the other. "Revenant, Revenant, 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 Revenant," the two hostages repeated in a strange language. Playwright tried to grab them in their frightened state, only for a golden blur to slam him down to the floor. The gold blur and a few more blurs running through the room and tying up any villains or gangsters still conscious. Stomping in front of the enraged Terias was a Latino woman in a golden suit made to withstand the speeds she travels. Black lightning bolts travel up her sides and down to her neck to the middle of her chest. "Whoa there, big guy. Come on, Terry. Let's drop the supervillains," Blue Gold Blur says gently, putting on her patented smile as she moves to take tragedy and comedy from Terias. Terias sighs as he finally stops floating and drops them both unceremoniously. The two stumbled into Gold Blur, who cuffed them with a grin. "Dad!" Topaz ran over to Terias, hugging him hard. He smiles, hugging her back and smiling down at her. This seemed to confuse the two hostages that had been on the stage, refusing to move the whole time. Terias looked at them, and his face softened into a small smile. "I am not dead, and I am not vengeful," he told them in the language they had called him a revenant in. He walks over and helps them up to their feet, before pulling them and Topaz into a hug, silently hugging them as he took a deep breath to calm down. Looking at these two up close like this, there was no doubt to Terias that these two were the twins of his friends.